Hey guys, this is RolloutReviews with RolloutReviews bringing you another BIONICLE review. This time it is set number 70785, Pohatu, Master of Stone. This set contains 66 pieces and retails for about $15 US. In a backwards turn of events, Pohatu probably has the most straightforward, basic, and uninspired build out of the 6 new Toa, which is just strange to see on Pohatu of all characters, seeing as all of his previous incarnations were the Toa to bring something new and interesting to the table. That's not to say this guy is all boring and all uninspired. He has some really cool ideas going on, but at his core, he's probably the most simply constructed. We'll take a look at that construction starting from the bottom up. Pohatu is the smallest of the 6 Toa, and we can see that in his legs. They are fairly short. He's got a lot more silver introduced into his color scheme than any of his previous incarnations, and the brown color is actually burnt orange, the same color we got on things like the Gecko Bird and the 2001 Mictoran Huki. We can see the new armor piece acting as knee armor almost. It kind of makes it look like his legs are baggy cargo pants or something, in my opinion. If we turn to the back, we can see some bright neon green bone pieces here, which if nothing else, definitely stand out. You can also see that his legs are fairly bare towards the back. If nothing else, it lets his knees bend pretty far, but it can look a little bit unsightly. Also, bending his knee this far causes this gap right there. Towards the front, he has the Brain Attack version chest piece down below, and up above, the printing continues to be hit or miss. In this case, I feel it's closer to the latter. Just like Tahu and Liwa, it's pretty abstract and all over the place, and I'm not a huge fan of that. Once again, he does have the exposed ball joints on either side here, and there's not much you can do about that. If we turn to the back, we can see he has this instead of back armor. Now this will become an extra weapon when we get into his dual weapon functionality, but strip that away and his back is completely bare, unlike any of the other Toa. His arms are probably the most interesting part about his construction. As you can see, they're asymmetrical. On this side, he has no shoulder armor to speak of. He has silver shell pieces and black bone pieces underneath. You'll also notice that his elbow joint is a ball joint. And while this was simple enough to accomplish, it does add a lot to his articulation, adding an extra ball joint. On this side, you can see he has the brown color shell pieces. You'll also notice that he has the bright neon green for the bone pieces underneath, as well as a similar elbow joint. He has the new armor piece acting as shoulder armor, and on his lower arm, a couple of teeth pieces sticking out. I guess the idea is that he lives in the desert, and there are dead things in the desert? I'm not entirely sure. Pohatu never really had any signature armaments in his previous incarnations, so they could get creative when coming up with weapons for this guy. They gave him these boomerangs, and contrary to his construction, these are the most inspired. In this configuration, they're called Stormerangs, and that is just campy and awesome. I love their style, very similar to Liwa and Gali's axe heads with an overabundance of pistons and turbines and vents. Towards the top here, you have a Borak eye in trans neon green, and I'll speculate on what this is when we take a look at his dual weapon functionality. Speaking of which, there's also a pin sticking out of one side of this weapon that'll come into play there as well. On that pin, there is an axis allowing the top half to move and collapse. I wish this connection was a little bit more solid, but it holds together pretty well. Pohatu wears the Mask of Stone, providing him his elemental abilities. This takes a lot of inspiration from the original Konoe Kakama. In fact, it looks much more like an upgraded version of this mask than even the Kakama Nuva. Of course, you get a golden version of this mask in this set, and for the last time, this is a great convenience, seeing as in 2002, to get the golden versions of the masks, you had to search for them in blind boxed mask packs. This makes things that much easier. His underlying head is more or less the same as all of the others, featuring some bright neon green light piping. The mask attaches just like all of the others as well, having some nubs on the inside that go into the holes on the sides of the head. Just like that. If we come to the back here and press on the eye stalk, it will launch his mask off of his face, which in hand is a really fun gimmick despite its impracticality. Here is Pohatu with his normal brown mask, and here he is with his golden mask. Like any of the other Toa, he has a gear function. Unfortunately, it's no longer in his legs, but given his weapon choice, this probably makes the most sense. He's got a bright yellow gear on his back, signifying that this is where you activate the gimmick. By turning it left and right, it'll swing his arm up and down. This is probably the most free gear function out of any of the Toa. He has no heavy weapons, and he's got no shoulder armor getting in the way, so it's fairly smooth and unhindered. Just because of the friction in the function itself, I can bring this up and his arm doesn't droop back down. I can also move this arm around and the gear function does not interfere. I do think it's interesting, however, that despite having two weapons, he only has a single gear function. It's not bad, it's just weird. Also, because he has no shoulder armor, the view from the top isn't very good at all. The gap between the torso piece and the gearbox just looks off. His dual weapon functionality involves removing his boomerangs. From there, we're going to take this piece off of his back and give it to him as a sidearm. I like to think of this as a large dagger weapon, and in that respect, I wish it looked a bit more blade-like, but it is what it is. This is also probably the reason he only has a single gear function. From here, we're going to take his boomerangs and fold them up before attaching them to the bottoms of his feet. They'll become sand shoes of sorts that allow him to walk on desert dunes without sinking. And of course, they somewhat resemble his toe extensions from 01. I'm sure he could use these for kicking as well. Now you can also deploy them while they are on his feet, turning them from stormerangs into jetarangs. These allow him to conjure up sandstorms around himself and use them to fly around. These are very cool. Obviously, he uses the turbine down below for lift, but I see the Borak eyes here as some kind of futuristic form of propulsion, allowing him to fly forward. Obviously, having jet boots, he kind of reminds me of Iron Man in some ways, and I like posing him accordingly. Despite the fact that he no longer has a gear function in his legs, and he no longer has the Mask of Speed, this sort of gives him an air of quickness regardless, and I really like that. Unfortunately, what I don't like is taking these off of his feet because, as I said, the connection with that pin isn't very solid, and it likes sticking to his foot a lot more than it likes sticking to the boomerang. So when I pull this off, it sort of just crumbles to pieces, which is unfortunate. This set also comes with a skull spider. In this case, however, it's more of a skull scorpion, some kind of desert breed. Aside from the tail, it's pretty much the same one that came with Liwa in the dark blue color. The legs move, the tail moves, and if we flip it around to the back, we can see it acts as a mask. If Pohatu were to get his mask knocked off of his face, we can then replace it with a skull spider, leaving him under its control. Does look a little bit silly with the scorpion tail. However, we can knock it off of his face just as easily, unless of course we were to wrap the legs around the back, locking that feature in place and making things much more difficult for the Toa of Stone. Whereas all of the other Toa have varied builds and interesting armor layouts, the only interesting aspect of Pohatu's construction are the asymmetrical arms. And personally, that doesn't cut it for me. He also has the lowest parts count, and overall feels much less substantial than either Liwa or Gali, who are in the same price range. I like his mask and I like his weapons, but aesthetically, that's about it. All of that said, as I continued to mess around with him, this guy grew on me exceptionally faster than any of the other Toa. To me, Pohatu is the most fun to play with. He's got no armor getting in the way, no heavy weapons dragging him down. He's easily the most posable of the six. I love the idea behind his design, the way he moves and the way he fights, and in the end, I like him so much better now than I did when I first built him. Overall, like any of the other Toa, he's a great set for the same reasons I mentioned that Tahu is a great set in his review. And while maybe he shouldn't be your first choice, I can definitely recommend him. So that is about it, guys, and this is IX Roll at IX, signing off.